Let's wrap this up, Barry. Let's finish this up with a little conversation
Sure.
about the U.S. economy, the potential of inflation, the Fed's last FOMC statement, where they were basically saying, look, we're cautious. We want to see what might happen midterm here because of the Trump effect with the tariffs. Literally, and I was surprised to see him say it, was basically talking about the fact that some prices might be going up already on items that people believe will be facing a tariff because
Hmm.
they're buying now instead of waiting to purchase something a few months later. Scott, you've been alluding to this for weeks.
Yeah, I bought some
What
tires
Pat
recently.
yeah, but what Pal also spoke about was the fact that washing machines, for instance, are going to face tariffs. I don't know from where, maybe China or something like that. So the
Could be
price of the
Mexico.
washing machines were going up, have been going up, but at the same time, dryers, and this is out of Pal's mouth, dryers, the prices have been going up too, and people have been buying them more also, but the dryers are not facing tariffs. So my question here is, what do you think the implications of all these things are? And also, how do you view the behavioral sentiment of individuals as opposed to the governments when these things interlock and affect the economy? Do you see this as one big stupidity circus, or do you believe that there are some bona fide things in here? The last thing I'm going to say is that I saw a very interesting comment from someone who is pro tariffs, basically alluding to the fact that cheap labor in other countries like China, like Mexico, like Vietnam, like India, in a sense, needs to be not so much penalized, but to have a counterweight. And you do that via tariff.
Yeah. So back to the beginning of your question statement. If I could just get a washing machine that put enough water in the washer to cover the clothes, I think I'd be happy. That's kind of the like I'm really simple when it comes to like washers and dryers. But my wife and I'll give you a sort of an anecdote here. Years ago, we went out to replace the washer and dryer. So we were at ABT, which is a store there in Chicagoland, and looking at all, we got the fanciest models we could find. I mean, they were nice. Brought them home. It looks like you're landing the space shuttle. Big panels and that type of thing. And we turn it on, and it just puts a little bit of water in the washing machine, and half your clothes don't get wet during the entire cycle. And we could not change it. There was no setting where you could put more water in it. And so we took it back. And then I said, give me the cheapest big bucket, old style washer you can find me. And for a third of the price, we brought that home, and it worked fabulously. So anyway, I didn't mean to take us down that rabbit hole, but
No, no, no. It goes hand in hand with the government oversight and control over
it
things.
does. It
Yeah,
does.
this has been a topic recently for Robert and me about refrigerators because we keep going through brand new refrigerators, but we have two in the garage that are 35 years old and work great.
Yes.
But
Yes.
all the ones with a little microchip in it, a little faceplate that's $1,000 if anything goes wrong with it,
Yeah.
those like will last 5 years. We just had to get rid of a GE that was 4.5 years old because it
Yeah.
stopped staying cold and
Yeah.
the water stopped coming out and the ice stopped coming out. It's one thing after another.
You don't want to think it's planned obsolescence, although I'm sure that's
I think it is.
okay. Anyway, back to your question
Yeah.
about the economy, Robert. So I think Pal's right to be cautious and kind of wait and see. And obviously, we see that the Trump administration is already applying pressure for them to lower the rates. I am not convinced that the inflation that we were in was either transitory or over. I think that based on our debt, the globe's debt overall, that we're going to see the collective devaluation of currency against goods. And so you may not see it reflected in the differential between the currency pairs, but you're going to see the cost of goods go up, I would say, overall.
Hence your interest in commodities and commodity funds that
Yes,
you've been
yes,
speaking about.
yes, absolutely. I think that is probably a place to be, even just as a means to hedge against potential inflation. Now, I found it interesting Trump's approach. I don't know if he's a genius or if he's lucky, but boy, he makes some good moves. Putting the tariffs in place is a good way to tap the brakes on potential inflation. Now, don't get me wrong. Putting tariffs in place is going to create artificial price hikes on some goods. It will, but it will slow the economy down. It just will. And it will, in the end, bring production back home to the United States. It will, I think, help increase the standards of living for those that are working, I think, cover some of our national debt and deficit issues. So I think it's a good counterbalance. But the Trump administration and Trump himself is absolutely spot on with these tariffs. I'll back up. I have always been on the conservative side of things and always been for free trade. I would much rather have no tariffs across the globe and let's just duke it out.
Me too. Me too. Yeah.
That's where I am.
Yeah.
I think tariffs are counterproductive to global trade and societies around the world. I think they hurt us. It's just more taxes going to governments. That's all it is. Whichever way it's flowing. But the reality is that we have been getting the worst end of the stick for a very long time. You know, we have ridiculous tariffs on us that were placed on us in China, and they basically just closed the markets to us. We can't.
That's true. Yeah, I used to live in China, by the way, so really? I saw that firsthand. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to hear about your experience in China and get your thoughts on that. We'll have maybe
sure.
If you guys could have me back on sometime in the future. We could have that discussion.
Yeah, I would love to.
But anytime you make big policy moves like this, it takes about, whether it's an interest rate hike or cut or a monetary policy shift or fiscal policy shift or tariffs or anything like this, it takes about 18 months for it to, if the economy's normal, it takes about 18 months for it to work its way into the pricing mechanism.
Right.
So, you know, we're seeing a bit of a blip here. We have April approaching quickly. And then the impact is not going to be fully seen for about 18 months. And then if the policies change at any point, it'll take about that long for it to unwind.
That's interesting because that brings us straight into the heart of the next election cycle. And so the question then will be, will the consumers, particularly those who swung and got Trump into office hoping for lower grocery bills, will they have the patience to sit out the rest of that 18-month period to see that there's benefits coming from it? I guess we'll have to find out.
Yeah, we will. And I think tactically, Trump is doing what he can to make sure that the things that are going to be measured, the price of eggs, the price of cereal, general price of food, gas or whatever, is going to be where it needs to be. Cars, houses, land, big ticket items. I don't know how that's going to turn out.
This was my point about the behavioral sentiment. That, Powell is talking about only a few months. He's talking about 2 interest rates over the course of the rest of the year. But based on the fact of what you just said, Barry, the real results of tariffs and all of the shenanigans that will go on while countries are going back and forth and the negotiations are moving forward are really going to only be seen a year and a half from now.
That's right.
The next few months is going to be basically influenced, Scott, by people panic buying washing machines or dryers or tires. And the Fed, I'm no fan, as you know, Barry, of central banks a lot of the time. I think that they're reactive, not proactive. You have the Bank of England, as you're sitting in London, that is basically sitting on their ass with an economy that's certainly suffering from recessionary pressures, but yet they have a main borrowing rate of 4.50.
Yep.
It's very high when you have a recession going on. And yet they're trying to counterbalance it, in my opinion, with what's going on with the Fed. But the Fed also, problematically, 4 years ago was basically saying, look, this is transitory inflation, not realizing for a second, because in many ways, I don't think they've ever sold ice cream from a truck to a kid. They never sold newspapers from a stand. They're in ivory towers. And they didn't, for some reason, think about the high price of logistics. They didn't think about the high price of energy. And this caused massive inflation for 2.5 years. And now they're talking about things that are really about behavioral sentiment. And really what they need to do, in my opinion, sorry to be going off here in a soliloquy, they have to change their rhetoric, I think. And maybe, in my opinion, they should be proactive and actually cut the interest rate a little bit and say, look, we're going to cut by 1/4 of a point now, and we're going to see where the cards go. You know,
Yeah.
why not start lowering the interest rate now, and then if you need to raise it up? But I suspect they're making a mistake once again.